I first saw him when I was still just a girl, bold, reckless, full of fire. He was standing on a scaffold high above the courtyard of my school, painting a mural with the confidence of a god and the appetite of a sinner. His name was Diego Rivera. He was huge, not just in size but in presence. He filled the air. His hands were covered in paint, his shirt stained, his eyes wild with vision. I looked up at him and told my friend, "One day, I'll marry that man." She laughed, of course. I was only 18, thin as a reed, with one leg weaker than the other. He was 42, famous, married, and known for breaking hearts like bottles. But I've never been the kind of woman who asks permission from reality. I was born in the Blue House in Coyoacán in 1907, though later I liked to say 1910, the year the Mexican Revolution began. I wanted my birth to be tied to the birth of my country. My father, Guillermo, was a photographer, gentle, patient, and kind. My mother, Matilda, was strict and devout. From her, I inherited stubborn faith. From him, the artist's eye. At 6, polio twisted my right leg. The children at school called me names. I limped, hid my leg under long skirts, and learned early that people stare, so I decided to give them something worth staring at. I wanted to be a doctor once. I loved anatomy, science, the elegance of the human body. I wanted to heal others. But fate, mischievous as ever, had other plans. In 1925, everything changed. A bus crash shattered my body like porcelain. A metal rod pierced my pelvis, my spine cracked, my ribs broke. I woke up covered in blood and disbelief. Doctors whispered I wouldn't live. I did. But I was never the same. They encased me in a plaster corset. I lay flat on my back for months, trapped between pain and silence. My father built me a mirror over the bed so I could see myself, and so began my real education. I started to paint. With trembling hands, I painted my face, my body, my loneliness. I painted what hurt and what refused to die. That's how I met myself. That's how I survived. When I could finally walk again, I wanted to show someone my paintings, someone who would tell me the truth. And the truth, I thought, lived in Diego Rivera. He was painting a mural at the Ministry of Education. I climbed the scaffolding, stood behind him, and said, "Diego, come down. I need you to see my work." He looked at me, probably amused, this tiny girl with a fierce stare, but he came down. He studied my paintings in silence. Then he smiled and said, "These are honest. This is real art." That moment changed everything. He began visiting my house, giving me advice, drinking coffee with my parents. I didn't care that he was 20 years older, or that women followed him like moths to fire. I saw something beyond the scandals. I saw the soul of an artist, enormous and tender, capable of both creation and destruction. I fell in love with that contradiction. My mother disapproved. She called him that communist, that monster. She said our marriage would be like an elephant marrying a dove. She was wrong. There was nothing delicate about me, and Diego was not a beast. We were two storms colliding. We married in 1929. I wore a traditional Tewana dress, proud and defiant, while he wore a plain suit that barely fit him. The ceremony was small, but the gossip was enormous. Everyone had an opinion. No one understood, except us. Our first home was two studios connected by a bridge, separate, but linked like our hearts. I could feel him even when we were apart. He painted the world, workers, revolutions, factories. I painted myself, my wounds, my joy, my truth. He said I was his mirror. I said he was my wound. We traveled to the United States for his commissions. I hated it. Everything was big and cold and made of steel. The people, the buildings, the smiles, all mechanical. I missed Mexico's dirt, its heat, its soul. Still, I smiled for him. I drank tequila at fancy dinners and told the Americans what I thought of their civilization. I don't think they liked me much. That made two of us. In Detroit, I became pregnant. For the first time, I felt hope looming inside me, fragile, impossible hope. But my body betrayed me. I lost the baby in a flood of pain and blood that nearly killed me. When I woke up in the hospital, I painted Henry Ford Hospital, myself naked on a bed, my body bleeding, surrounded by floating symbols, a fetus, a snail, a pelvis. Everyone said it was shocking. For me, it was the only way to breathe. Diego stood beside my bed, helpless. He didn't know how to love someone who couldn't be fixed. I didn't know how to stop loving him even when it hurt. I once said, there have been two great accidents in my life, the bus and Diego. Diego was by far the worst. And yet, I would never have wished to live without either. Our marriage was full of noise, laughter, fights, paint, politics, betrayal. He cheated often. I cried rarely. I found my own lovers, men and women, who understood pieces of me Diego never could. But he was always the center of my orbit. No matter where I went, I spun back toward him. I wrote him letters full of anger and devotion. Nothing compares to your hands, I told him. Nothing like the green gold of your eyes. I love you more than my own skin. I meant every word. Because even when he broke my heart, he gave me something no one else ever could. He saw me, truly saw me, and didn't look away. And that, for me, was enough. I used to think love could fix anything.
Pain.
Loneliness. Even the wreckage inside me. But love, real love, doesn't fix. It breaks and rebuilds you, again and again, until you stop recognizing the woman in the mirror and start painting her instead. That's what Diego did to me. He broke me open, and I learned to make art from the pieces. When we married, I knew who he was. He was Diego Rivera, genius, revolutionary, and womanizer. He painted walls with the fury of a god and seduced with the same brush. But I was not his decoration. I was fire too. In the early years, we traveled constantly. San Francisco, Detroit, New York, cities that felt nothing like home. He loved America's machines and noise. I missed Mexico's warmth and chaos. I wore my Tijuana dresses like armor, bright and defiant among their pale silks and pearls. They called me exotic. I called them boring. They asked what I thought of modern American society, and I told them, it's a bit dull. They all think they're so civilized. Diego laughed. The rich didn't. I didn't care. In Detroit, I got pregnant. For months, I carried a fragile hope inside me. My body was already broken, a spine of splinters, a pelvis twisted like a branch, but I believed I could still grow life. I painted small sketches of my unborn child, little faces floating in dreams. And then one morning I woke to blood. So much blood. The doctors said the baby was gone. They said I nearly went with it. From that hospital bed, I painted Henry Ford Hospital. My body torn open, the tiny fetus still connected to me by a red thread.
People called it grotesque.
For me, it was truth. I painted my pain so it wouldn't eat me alive. Diego tried to comfort me, but how could he? He was a creator of worlds, not a healer of hearts. I stared at him and thought, you build nations on walls, Diego, but you can't hold mine together. After that, something inside me changed. I began to see the world through the lens of loss, raw, honest, unfiltered. While he painted revolutions, I painted my own body. My wounds became my language. My face became my canvas. My pain became my prayer. I painted myself because I was all I had left. New York was next. Diego was adored, the great Mexican muralist, the man who painted Lenin in the heart of Rockefeller Center until they tore it down. He called it political censorship. I called it poetic justice. They paid him millions to paint, then destroyed his work because he told the truth. I was proud and angry because even revolution had its price. While he painted skyscrapers, I walked the streets and hated every inch of them. Everything was about money. I missed dirt, laughter, tortillas, tequila. I missed color. I missed me. By the time we returned to Mexico, something had shattered between us. We laughed, we fought, we pretended, but I could feel the distance growing. He was chasing women again. I could smell their perfume on his shirts, the the cheap kind that tried too hard to hide guilt. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was free too. But when betrayal came from the one place I never expected, I learned that pain still had new depths. He slept with my sister, Christina. When I found out, it was as if the air turned to glass, sharp, thin, impossible to breathe. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I cut my hair short, put on a man's suit, and painted myself like a warrior. Self-portrait with cropped hair. In the painting, I sit in a chair, scissors in hand, strands of hair falling around me. Above my head, I wrote the words from a song. Look, if I loved you, it was for your hair. Now that you're bald, I don't love you anymore. It wasn't true, of course. I still loved him. But painting that lie was the only way to survive the truth. For a while, I left him. I traveled, exhibited my work, drank, and laughed too loudly. I had lovers, men, women, souls who wanted to taste the fire without getting burned. But none of them were Diego. They could touch my body, not my essence. Even oceans couldn't separate us. He wrote to me constantly, letters full of apologies and longing. I answered some, burned others. He said I was his conscience. I said he was my curse. And we both knew we were lying. When we finally divorced in 1939, the papers said it was inevitable, the end of a storm. But what they didn't understand was that storms don't end. They move. They change shape. They circle back. I told everyone I was glad. I threw parties, flirted with danger, painted more fiercely than ever. But at night, I dreamed of him. I dreamed of his hands, thick, clumsy, tender. I dreamed of his voice calling me Nina. I dreamed of his absence, heavy as a stone on my chest. That same year, I painted the two Fridas, two versions of myself sitting side by side, hearts exposed and connected by a thin artery. One Frida wore the Tewana dress, proud and loved. The other was pale, bleeding, abandoned. It was me before and after him, and both were real. People asked which one survived. I told them, both. Neither. I paint to keep them alive. In my diary I wrote, I tried to drown my sorrows, but the bastards learned to swim.
And it was true.
No matter how far I ran, I found him again, in colors, in dreams, in pain. He was my shadow, my mirror, my double. Even when we were apart, we belonged to each other, two halves of a whole that refused to die. So I learned to live with the contradiction. I could hate him and still love him. I could lose him and still carry him. I could be destroyed and still paint. Maybe that's what love really is. Not something that saves you, but something that dares you to stay alive through it all. When Diego and I divorced, I told the world I was free. I laughed louder, painted more, smoked longer cigarettes, and said outrageous things at parties just to prove I didn't care. But every night, when the lights went out, I felt the same truth press against my ribs. I still loved him. No amount of tequila or lovers or applause could change that. After the divorce, I moved back into La Casa Azul, my childhood home in Coyoacán. It was bright, filled with cobalt walls, green plants, and parrots that screamed louder than I did. I tried to fill the silence with color. But silence has its own stubborn way of staying. My health was getting worse. Surgeries, braces, painkillers. My body had become a museum of wounds. I painted from bed, brushes tied to my hands when I couldn't grip them anymore. The doctors said I should rest. But they didn't understand that painting was my rest. I painted the two Fridas after the divorce, the woman he loved and the woman he left. Two versions of me, sitting side by side, hearts bleeding but still beating. People said it was sad.
I thought it was honest.
Then Paris called. Andre Breton invited me to exhibit my work, calling me a born surrealist. He thought I painted dreams. I told him I painted reality. Paris was beautiful, but it stank of pretension. Everyone talked too much and felt too little. Picasso gave me a pair of earrings shaped like hands. Duchamp understood me. Everyone else was just performing. Still, The Louvre bought one of my paintings, the frame, making me the first Mexican artist of my time in their collection. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it just reminded me that I was far from home. Far from him. When I returned to Mexico, I learned that Diego was sick, not in body, but in soul. He missed me. He admitted it to everyone except me. I missed him too, though I would have rather swallowed glass than said it aloud. In 1940, fate decided to play its cruel joke again. We were both invited to San Francisco for an art exhibition. When I saw him, standing there, big, awkward, older, and somehow softer, I felt everything I'd tried to bury rise up like smoke. We talked for hours. About art, about our country, about how badly we'd hurt each other. I told him he'd broken my heart. He said he'd never stopped loving me. It was strange. The pain between us no longer burned. It just ached, like an old scar that still remembers the wound. That December, on the 8th, we remarried. Yes, remarried. People thought I was mad. They said, "Frida, you'll suffer again." And I said, "Probably." But I knew I couldn't live without him. This time, though, I made new rules. No lies. No pretending. No ownership. I told him, "I love you too much to let you destroy me again. So this time, no sex, no jealousy, no illusions. We'll live as companions. Two artists. Two free souls." He agreed. And for the first time, maybe ever, he kept his promise. We moved back into the Blue House, the place that had seen me born, broken, and reborn again. He painted. I painted. He grew quiet. I grew louder. Our love had changed shape. It wasn't the wild, consuming fire it once was. It was something gentler, a steady flame that burned without needing to destroy. Sometimes, I would look across the room at him, bent over his canvas, and feel a strange peace. I no longer needed him to complete me. I just needed him near. My body kept betraying me, but my art kept saving me. In the 1940s, I painted my most honest work, the broken column, self-portrait with thorn necklace, without hope. Each one was a confession, a declaration, a rebellion. I painted myself strapped in metal corsets, pierced with nails, surrounded by tears. Not to ask for pity, but to show that pain could be beautiful, that suffering could still bloom. People said I was obsessed with myself. They didn't understand. My body was the battlefield. My face was the flag. I started teaching art at La Esmeralda. My students called me La Doctora. I told them, "Don't paint what you see. Paint what you feel." They came to my home to learn, and I fed them tamales, tequila, and truth. Artists, poets, and rebels filled my house. I had affairs, friendships, laughter, and life. But Diego was always there, in the next room, or in my thoughts, or in my blood. We didn't talk about fidelity anymore. We talked about art, politics, color. We'd survived the worst parts of love and found something better: understanding. In 1944, I had a spinal surgery that nearly broke me. I had to wear steel corsets for years. They called me the Woman of Iron. I painted butterflies on them. When the pain became too much, I would whisper to myself, "I am not sick. I am broken. But I am happy to be alive as long as I can paint." And through it all, Diego stayed. He brought me flowers, books, and sometimes silence. He wasn't perfect, but he was present. And for me, that was love enough. In 1950, I lost my right leg to gangrene. When I woke and saw the empty space beneath the sheet, I didn't cry. Instead, I painted a picture of a foot and wrote beneath it, "Feet, what do I need you for when I have wings to fly?" I meant it. Pain had been my teacher, and love had been my test. And somehow, after everything I had passed, by then, Diego and I were no longer lovers. We were something rarer. Two souls who had burned each other and still chose to stay close to the flame. He once told me, "You are the most important part of my life." And I told him, "I love you more than my own skin." We had destroyed each other, forgiven each other, and built something new, something that no one else could ever understand. We had outlived passion. We had outlived pride. We had reached the quiet, honest part of love, the kind that stays even when the body cannot. By the early 1950s, I was living more in hospitals than at home. Every breath hurt. Every movement felt like glass beneath my skin. But I wasn't afraid of pain anymore. It had been my companion for so long that I had learned to make peace with it, even make art with it. They said I was dying. But I told them, I've been dying since the day of the crash. The rest has just been painting. My bed became my studio. They set up a wooden frame above me to hold my canvas, my brushes within reach. I painted lying flat, half drugged on morphine, surrounded by the smell of turpentine and medicine. My body was failing, but my mind was wild, full of colors, fruit, animals, blood, and laughter. I painted because I still had something to say, and my mouth was too tired to say it. I told a friend once, I paint flowers so they will not die. Maybe that's what I was doing, painting to keep life alive a little longer. Then came the exhibition. My first solo show in Mexico. My home. Can you believe it took them that long to celebrate me in my own country? Foreigners had hung my paintings in New York and Paris, but Mexico had waited. Maybe they didn't know what to do with a woman like me, half saint, half sin. My doctors begged me not to go. They said my heart couldn't take it. But what did doctors ever know of hearts? I arrived in an ambulance. They carried me inside the gallery on a stretcher, and I made them put my bed in the middle of the room. The guests gasped. I laughed. I raised a glass of tequila and shouted, Viva la vida! Long live life! People cheered. Someone cried. Diego stood in the corner, his eyes full of love and regret, and I thought, this is my last rebellion. My last dance with death. Around me hung all my ghosts. The broken column. The two Fridas. The wounded deer. Self-portrait with cropped hair. Each one was a confession carved in color. They called me the poet of pain. They never understood that I wasn't painting pain. I was painting existence.
Pain was just part of the price.
I never wanted to be pitted. I wanted to be seen. And that night, for the first time, I truly was. After the exhibition, my body began to collapse. Surgeries blurred together. My lungs filled with water. My bones felt like they were crumbling inside me. Sometimes I would wake and forget which part of me still worked. My hands, at least, still obeyed. So I painted. Always I painted.
Small things now.
Still lives, fruit, flowers, sunlit tables. Simple, joyful things. Everyone thought I was losing strength. In truth, I was finding peace. My last painting was of watermelons, red and green, bursting with life. Across the bottom, I wrote the words, Viva la vida! Long live life! It was the truest thing I'd ever said. I knew my time was short. In my diary, I began to write differently, like someone who is already halfway gone. My words tangled with sketches of wings, doves, and skeletons laughing at the absurdity of it all. On July 2nd, 1954, pneumonia took my breath, but not my will. I insisted on being wheeled to a protest against U.S. intervention in Guatemala. Everyone said I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I had spent a lifetime fighting with color. Why not fight with my body one last time? The crowd cheered as I lifted my fist, coughing so hard I could barely stay upright. Diego pushed my wheelchair, silent, proud, afraid. I knew he understood. I was saying goodbye my way. A few days later, I felt the end approaching. My room in La Casa Azul was filled with candles, flowers, and the smell of paint. The parrots squawked on the terrace. I asked the nurse to open the windows. I wanted to die, with the wind on my face. That night, I wrote in my diary, I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return. Then I closed my eyes. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, I slipped away. They said it was July 13th, 1954. I was 47. Mexico woke to the news and wept like it had lost one of its own limbs. Thousands came to the Palacio de Bellas Arts to see my coffin draped in the Mexican flag. They say I looked peaceful, maybe even amused. When they lit the flames for my cremation, the heat cracked the door of the kiln, and my hair caught fire. rising like a crown. I suppose death knew I had always loved a little drama. Diego didn't speak at the funeral. He just stood there, enormous and broken, his hands trembling as if he no longer knew what to do with them. Later he wrote, "The most tragic day of my life was the day Frida died. Too late, I realized the most wonderful part of my being was her." I believe him. Because for all his flaws, Diego loved me the only way he knew, completely and clumsily. He locked my things away after I was gone. My brushes, my dresses, my sketches, unable to face the echo I left behind. But echoes don't stay locked. They wander, they whisper, and they paint. He followed me 3 years later. They placed his ashes beside mine in the blue house. Now we live together again. In silence, in color, in memory. Visitors come from all over the world to see our home. They walk through the rooms where we fought, laughed, and made love between canvases. They look at my bed, my wheelchair, my corsets, and sometimes they cry.
I want to tell them not to.
I want to tell them that I lived exactly as I wanted, loudly, honestly, painfully, beautifully. That I loved a man who broke me and still made me whole. That I turned my scars into art and my heartbreak into history. That I did not bow to life. I stared it down and painted it anyway. So when they stand before my final painting and read those words, "Viva la vida," I hope they understand what I meant. It wasn't a denial of pain. It was a declaration of victory. Because even in the end, when the brushes fell from my hands and the body I'd fought for decades finally gave up, my spirit was still shouting, "Long live life."